Hello and welcome to Quarantales. Today we're taking a trip to Los Angeles where we're meeting Ashley Land, who has been on the front lines of this battle of Black Lives Matter and will bring us more knowledge and educate us a little bit more about this movement and what justice really means today. Hey Ashley, thank you for joining us.
Hey everyone, I also just want to preface that I'm definitely not an expert, but I'm going to talk about my experiences and hopefully inspire you all to get involved.
Thank you. Ashley, you have been at some of these protests already of the Black Lives Matter movement. How have they been? How has your experience of this movement been so far?
I think, this movement is ongoing. A lot of people are like, Black Lives Matter, like it's coming full force in the media right now, but we have to remember, like, this movement was started in 2013, and so it has been ongoing. And I think, there have been other catalysts, kind of like Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, that kind of started this kind of mass, like, knowledge about it, but it has been ongoing since it hit the ground running. And, I feel like George Floyd was really the catalyst for this movement specifically. And, I think it looks a little bit different, specifically because we were all in quarantine. We were in the house. We kind of, detached from the world a little bit. And when we started to get the string of all of these different murders, like Ahmaud Arbery, and then it was Breonna Taylor, and then it was Tony McDade, and then it was George Floyd, I think people really started to wake up and the movement kind of reinvented itself. And I think, like, I've been to 4 protests in the past week, and, I think it's incredible to see, like, so many people being involved. I feel like I've never felt or seen, like, a big movement like this in my lifetime. And I think it's definitely, accumulating from, like, all of these years of, like, past organizing through Black Lives Matter. Like, this is really the culminating moment.
That's incredible. And so you mentioned a lot of the people who have been sort of faced with these injustices time and time again. So how do you personally feel when you hear about these sort of brutal murders, like we mentioned, George Floyd, whether it's Breonna? Like, how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel, at some points it makes me feel numb. At some points it makes me feel angry. I feel like, before, people were kind of getting desensitized to Black deaths by the police because we would just see them so often on our social media timelines. And I feel like, every life matters, every life is precious. And just to think about the family members who are losing their loved ones in such a public way, and they're innocent, literally being murdered, it makes me sad because it could easily be my brother, my mother, my relative, who is, being taken so senselessly by state-sanctioned violence. And so I think, it just makes me upset.
So actually, you mentioned that, you worry this could be your brother, your relative, someone from your family. And that makes me think, did you have to have these conversations at an early age with your family members about the risk of state-sanctioned violence, or do you ever wonder if your life is at threat as well?
I definitely wonder sometimes, like, when I get stopped by the police, or, I've gotten like 2 tickets this past year. These were like my first tickets ever. And I definitely clenched up at the wheel because you never know what may happen with these police officers who are very biased, who are working under a racist system. I think, Black people have their talk with their young people very young around, how you're supposed to act in public, how you're supposed to act around police. And, I didn't feel it as much, but definitely my brother, who is 8 years under me, I definitely always am, like, scared for him when he's, like, out on the bus, or like when he's coming home from work. because you never know what may happen. You never know who will be next to this senseless violence. And I know my mom has had a lot of talks with him about like not wearing his hoodie and things like that. And so just like respectability politics and how you're supposed to act and how you're supposed to carry yourself as like a young Black man or a young Black woman or a young Black person.
So, do you think this movement is actually going to bring change? Is this movement different from all the ones that have happened in the past?
You know, it's kind of hard to say. I feel like it definitely feels different to me. And I think a lot more people involved. My timeline has been filled with Black Lives Matter since the past 2 weeks, you know? I think people are really starting to listen. We've seen some tangible wins, you know, the Minneapolis, you know, school board decided to end their contract with the Minneapolis PD. We saw the same in Denver. We're starting to really hear conversations of defunding the police, which I don't think have ever been heard before. I think, like, you know, companies are starting to listen. Amazon, I've been seeing Jeff Bezos post, like, really ignorant emails from his customers, and he's like, I'm not taking it. Like, the whole Amazon homepage is Black Lives Matter. A lot of companies have been donating. My company that I work at donated to a lot of racial justice orgs. And so, you know, only time will tell, but I definitely see tangible wins that are really making me hopeful.
So you think this is not just sort of the PR opportunity for companies and people are actually with all their heart joining into the movement?
I think I think that a lot of companies are using this as a PR moment, but I don't think that they did that in the past. I think they like released a statement and called it a day. But I think a lot of people are like, you got to do more than just release a statement. Like, it's got to be something that's tangible and that people can see is like a act of good faith. And so I think, you know, I think it's definitely a PR thing because a lot of people are like, we're going to support Black-owned businesses only. Like, and if you're not a Black-owned business, like, what are you going to do for Black Lives Matter? But I think some businesses are, like, very genuine about it. And so you kind of just have to walk that line. But it's hopeful either way. I'll take your money gladly.
So recently, I think we also saw it, I believe it was on the New York Times, that there has been an increase in the support from people who actually believe in the Black Lives Matter movement now and support it. And I think that's sort of been a significant rise just over the last year. So I wonder, do you think when that actually brings about change, how do you think you're going to feel that change in your everyday life?
Repeat it one more time.
So I'm wondering if you think that, you know, when there is an actual change in the people's sentiment towards Black Lives Matter, how is that going to impact your everyday life going forward? What's going to change for you?
I mean, I think that people believing more in Black Lives Matter is great. I don't necessarily think it's going to create systemic change because we need to dismantle the systems that are really holding the racist and non-Black Lives Matter views accountable, and we need to dismantle those systems, i.e. the police departments, i.e. government in general, that were founded on white supremacist and racist values. And so, you know, my friends believe in Black Lives Matter now, or, you know, random people in different states believe in Black Lives Matter now. That's not going to change what's happening systemically. And so it's great to have you on our side. I can't wait to see you at the protest, but I don't think my quality of life is necessarily going to change because more people believe in it. We need to see action. We need to see you like holding your political leaders accountable in making like the political and systemic and policy changes that will help my quality of life.
So it's not just about the movement, but these sort of the chants that are coming out now to actually turning into tangible outcomes.
Yeah, of course, that's any movement. You know, the civil rights movement, they didn't just, you know, protest because they wanted to change people's minds. Like, they needed to vote. They needed to be not segregated. They needed to stop being lynched. They needed actual policy change to be able to improve their quality of life.
So, which brings me to think, we mentioned defunding the police, and we've heard about that a lot throughout the last few weeks. But what really is the alternative? So, what are we looking for? What is the change supposed to come in the form of?
So I think people are confused about defunding the police. People are like, I think they're confusing defunding it with abolishing it, which I'm definitely for abolishing it, but defunding it is not like taking away the police all at once. It's taking away the money that we're using for policing and putting it into things that will strengthen the social safety net, i.e. education, i.e. housing, i.e. healthcare, all these things that are important. When we look at, for example, South LA, which is predominantly Black and brown, and West LA, which is predominantly white, you can see the disparities in the grocery stores. You can see the disparities in how the streets are kept clean. You can see the disparities in how many hangout, gang spots, liquor stores, gas stations are in the cities, which leads to different qualities of life for people on the West Side versus South Side. And, I think instead of investing $3 billion in policing, which is what LA is doing right now, we can be using that money for the homelessness issue that we have, creating more affordable housing. We can be using it for after school programs for our youth. We can be using it for our healthcare, our streets. There's so many potholes and, unclean streets in South LA versus West LA. It's all pristine. How is that fair? How is that equitable? And so defunding the police is not about getting rid of the police altogether, which I am definitely for eventual abolishment of the police. But defunding police is investing in resources that will help, people not even have to need police because they're already taken care of.
Now, thank you for clearing that up. I know there's definitely a lot of confusion about what it really means to defund the police. But you mentioned South LA, and I know you've done some community justice work there. Could you tell me what sort of injustices you really see in places like South LA?
Yeah, I feel so I worked at Community Coalition. It's a nonprofit in South LA, and we did social justice, political organizing, civic engagement, and I worked there for 3 years organizing the Black and brown residents around social media. And, you can feel the disparity when you're crossing over from, West LA or from Culver City or, the place on the West Side when you get into South LA. There's been years, decades of disinvestment in South LA and its residents. It used to be this booming, thriving place. A lot of the auto places were there. And then during the 1992 uprising, which is similar to a lot of the looting and the burning that we saw during this uprising, everything was burned down and it never was rebuilt. And so, not only is South LA a food desert, they don't have the same quality of grocery stores that we see in other places. It also is not, it doesn't have the same, businesses that we see in other places. It doesn't have the same amount of, hospitals as other places. I think there's only one hospital on in South LA. And I think that that's telling of the injustice and inequitable things that we see on a daily basis. It's I try not to make it a black and white issue, but it is. You can literally feel the inequity that these Black and brown people face on a daily basis versus on the West Side. There's everything you could ever possibly need and more. And I think, the and more is the part that's inequitable because that and more should be going to the people in most need.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, sorry. And not to mention the policing there's way more police on the South Side or in South LA than in West LA. Police, racial profiling is at an all-time high in South LA. They're pulled over like 3 times as much as they are in the West Side. And I don't have the sources for these, but I know they're fact because I heard them ingrained in my head all the time. I think it may be a source in LA Times around LAPD stops in South LA. It's like literally triple the amount in West LA. And so I think that's important to mention because when we're talking about police, this is really like Black Lives Matter. Not only is it a fight with the police, but it's also a fight with anti-blackness. I think that's something to also uplift. It's not just about the police brutality, but they are systemically targeting Black people at a higher rate. And that's not just coincidentally. It's because of the anti-blackness that's also permeated in these systems.
When you say anti-blackness, Ashley, what is it that you're really referring to?
I would say that anti-blackness is literally when you are literally not only scared, but you're literally targeting people because they're Black. Like police are anti-Black because they target Black people at a higher rate because they believe they are inferior to white people, i.e. white supremacy. And it's literally not a reason that they have because of this. It's just there.
So that makes me now think that a lot of people have been changing Black Lives Matter to All Lives Matter. Do you think that's okay?
No, and I think it's like very ignorant to do that because I mean, I don't want to use one of those corny examples. Like people are like, if one house is on fire in one street, and the fire department come, would you like burn out all of them because all houses matter, or would you just do? Mm-hmm. Would you make sure you get out the fire in the house that has it? Mm-hmm. I don't want to use that example because it shouldn't even take all of that for you to understand that Black Lives Matter is all lives matter, because literally anti-blackness is in every community. Every community. Every single ethnicity has anti-blackness. We see this with Latinx people where, you know, their ancestors or their elders, you know, they're like, oh, you're getting too dark. Like I've heard this from my friends, like, don't be like so dark. And I don't know if it's in other cultures as well, but literally we know that anti-blackness exists. And so, you know, at the end of the day, yes, other people are being targeted by the police, other people of color, but at the same time, it's not at the same rate as Black people. And so what does that tell you? Like Black lives inherently are not mattering right now. And we are the ones who are under attack. And so I mean, I can't even go on at like how many social movements have been led by Black women. We're always at the forefront of everyone else's movement. And the one time we call on you all to come and help us on our movement, it's an issue. Like Black Lives Matter is all lives matter. That's it. Like we are only making it about us because we are the ones being affected the most. Like, of course, all human lives matter. That is like so elementary, and that's not what we're talking about. And people who say all lives matter are just trying to distract from what the movement really is. And like even within Black Lives Matter, you can, you know, take it further. I wanted to put this trans flag up on my screen because, you know, trans Black lives are even being more disproportionately affected. And, you know, we need to make sure this movement is inclusive and uplifting everyone who is the most vulnerable. And so, you know, that's just so stupid to me that people say all lives matter. It's literally you just want attention, I think.
So, actually, for everyone, not just in the US, but around the world who wants to be an ally, how do you think they can? What is the right way to be an ally for the movement?
I think, you know, there's a tons of different ways to be an ally. Like it's not, it does not look one way. People think like the protest is like shiny and like that's what I need to be doing. But we also are in the middle of the pandemic. And so I understand people may not want to protest and go outside. And so I think that, you know, you can donate to organizations. I've donated to Minneapolis Freedom Fund. I've donated to Equal Justice Initiative. There's plenty of other ones, Reclaim the Block, a bunch of them. that you can donate to. Sign the petitions. I think that, change.org is a really great place for petitions. We're still trying to get justice for Breonna Taylor. Her murderers have not been charged. That's like a big one that needs to be done. You can call your elected officials. In LA, we're trying to get Mayor Garcetti to defund the police even more. He already took out a $150 million chunk of the LAPD budget, but that was literally 5% of what their budget is. That's not enough. We need more. And so, there's a petition. Call Mayor Garcetti's office every day, all day, nonstop, and tell him that you want to defund the police. There's also this thing called the People's Budget in LA, and it is asking residents to fill out a survey on what you think should be invested in, like homelessness and affordable housing or educational resources. So that's important. I think the main thing that I am pushing for is people to hold their relatives and friends accountable. Like, I know it's uncomfortable to have conversations over the dinner table with your loved ones that they have racist ideologies or, white supremacist ideologies, but that's what it's going to take to get this movement to really stick. Like, we have to change people's hearts and minds. And so I am really pushing for people to just have normal everyday conversations around Black Lives Matter and, to not perpetuate anti-blackness. I think that's one of the strongest ways you can really get involved. And then obviously protesting, because at the end of the day, the tangible wins I talked about earlier, they were all through organizing and protesting. Like, unless you apply political pressure on these people, they are not going to care. And so as much as, I don't want to go out during a pandemic, that's literally disproportionately killing Black people. Let's not forget to mention, because Black people are dying at COVID-19 at higher rates. I'm going to put my body on the line because I believe that Black Lives Matter and I believe my community deserves better. And so I'm going to protest as long as I can and as long as I'm able to.
Thank you so much, Ashley. This was really informative, and it has been incredible to hear about your experiences and your passion for the movement. And I really hope that this movement sticks, like you said, and that it's not just sort of right now slogans on the streets, but it enters every house and we change the way we think.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on, and I appreciate the platform that you're putting on. I really appreciate you tapping me, and I hope everyone is inspired to get involved because we need you. Black Lives Matter is not a moment, it's a movement. We've been dealing with this for too long. It's been centuries, guys. And so my one request is that, look up what Juneteenth is, because, 4th of July, people try to celebrate the founding of the United States. But the United States was founded on such white supremacist, racist ideologies. Juneteenth is celebrated because that's when slavery was actually abolished on June 19th. 401 years ago. And so, really take the time and learn what that is. And if you feel compelled, celebrate that holiday because, that's when Black lives actually really mattered, not 1776. And even then it didn't really actually matter. So I implore you all to go look that up.
Thank you, Ashley. That is super helpful. And I really hope that we get more and more allies along the way.